Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Big Trouble in Little China. At the end of the day, I just want to say this is a very much retro esque like movie, and I know a lot of people might not have uh, gone out of the way to see this yet, and maybe you want to go out of your way to eventually buy my words, rent or buy this film. This is another John Carpenter movie, and at the end of the day, I just want to say that in which ways that I had seen it, pretty much you're much better off going and renting this film than actually going out and going at which ways that I did this. Because there are some times when I can go through this like free movie plus app, but they're in fact that is kind of a very much bootleggish like app. It doesn't have like the greatest quality or like connection because a lot of times I'll be watching the movies and most of them all tend to buffer too frequently to where you're like watching a minute of a film and then it buffers for like a minute and then you watch a minute of film and then it buffers for a minute and then it does that through the entire film. So it's a very kind of very patient like experience, but when going through that, I ultimately just want to watch a film for free, and if that's the only way to actually see and do that, then that's the way of which I can watch a movie for free and then talk about it. So, Big Trouble in Little China. How did I feel about this Kurt Russell film? Well, this Kurt Russell film done by John Carpenter. Honestly, for me, how did I feel about it? Well, I kind of really did love the line delivery of everybody. It is kind of funny how you can go through this movie and just through lines delivered alone, you can get a good giggle or laugh at some of the lines delivered. Um, a lot of the times, it seems like everybody is trying to kind of give what I would call like dry comedy or dry laughs, which is kind of funny. I enjoy that. It's been a while since I've seen a movie that isn't trying so hard to uh like I love subtle comedy. I don't like the like where it's obviously somebody's right in your face trying to do the joke and then like waiting for the laugh afterwards. Where in this movie it's all like subtle comedy that I thoroughly enjoyed. I really did enjoy how random this effing movie was. Looking at this film, it did very much remind me of the Eddie Murphy movie, The Golden Child, which a lot of people might not have enjoyed that movie or liked it or even saw it. But I enjoyed that movie, and that's where I kind of take this movie as is kind of similar. It also kind of gave me Goonie vibes, like the Goonies, where this movie like starts out with just two people, but at the end of all of it, it has like a group of people going and trying to rescue people, and yeah, it's it's very much very random, and it's very much like once you get to like get into the movie a little bit more, it's like, oh okay, so like, oh, okay, now I get it. I got it. Oh, okay. Here's um it was very reminiscent of a lot of like old fashioned um like Chinese like films or Asian like films, I guess we should say. It is very reminding of like when looking at all of the um looking at all the actual like anime like things, how you can kind of tie any of one of those to a movie quite like this. Um, Looking at this movie, it is funny how they kind of perfectly realize like where their star's weakness is, and so ultimately they they kind of like realize his weakness and kind of do things to still make him look good, but then also have a lot of side characters that throughout this movie can showcase certain skills, while Jack Burton is just kind of there, just like struggling, or just like, oh yeah, well I guess I should grab this, grab this thing over here, and then come back and it's kind of like Happy in Iron Man 2 throughout most of this movie. Excuse me, where Happy is just kind of decking like one guy, and then finally like he takes the one guy out, and Black Widow has taken down 10 different men. Like it's kind of like that. Like Jack Burton is the Happy from Iron Man 2. It's kind of like that, and it's really hilarious. Um it's it's funny to look at Kurt Russell's delivery in this movie, or like overall within this movie. You have it to where this movie feels like a foreign film, even when you have a star that is from America. Like he is very much delivering a foreign performance in a movie that is saying that it's a foreign film. Um, because ultimately simple things like them running, I'm like, well, like clearly like running, it's like that, like how they run in this movie, how they deliver lines in this movie, how everything has to be like, how everything has to just be to where they can't just say, well, hey, I'm just gonna go and collect this girl and I'll be back. No, like they have to go through this like I am going to win the heart of my betrothed, and I will come back with honor and this and that, and I'm just like, what? I'm like, what? Why can't you just say, yeah, I'm gonna go and rescue this girl and I'll be back. Hopefully, yeah, it's yeah. I'm like, no, none of the lines in this movie are delivered in the way that I mentioned. It's delivered in the like, yes, I will conquer the established forces, and I will come back with my wedded love, and we'll come back, and we'll hurrah, and this and that, and I'm like, what? 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 Not laughing at the lines, because I'm sure a lot of movies tend to talk like that, but like I just thought it was interesting how the lines were all delivered. Um, I really enjoyed how like Jack had this like John Wayne like twang in his voice, where it wasn't like, it definitely kind of does stick out as a very much different Kurt Russell performance, because like just having a simple accent for Kurt Russell that he has to deliver every time that he's really and truly Jack Burton, like how he always has to talk like this and just, hey there little lady, and like that's Jack Burton doing like, that's Kurt Russell doing like a John Wayne impression, or always like I almost made like, I almost would want it to be like, I almost thought it would sound like almost like a Canadian kind of accent in some kind of ways as well. Um but anyways, yeah. So Jack Burton. We have it to where this man kind of just like seems to, no matter what little thing he's doing, he always has the most attention on him. When looking at this movie, I would probably say that this feels like very much like the Star Lord of the past, like how like Chris Pratt's Star Lord feels very much like this character. Um, like I'm sure people could kind of call similarities to Ash from Evil Dead or Army of Darkness. Kind of like the same character, if the character was much more. Like I think kind of once we get into some of the Army Darkness ones, like I think, um, I think the character gets a little bit too goofy. Where I think Kurt Russell's character is very much like dry witted humor instead of being like goofy at any points. A lot of the times when he's either reacting to something or um he's ultimately just like there in the scene, not even saying anything, your eye is consistently on Kurt Russell because it's like you're wondering what he's going to do next. Like ultimately, I think that's the one true problem is with Kurt Russell being an ensemble piece, especially in this film. Like you're looking at Kurt Russell rather than everybody else. Um, to have something as simple as a girl with green eyes within this movie is an interesting way of making a movie very simple and yet effective. It's it's basically having like it is kind of funny how there isn't much of a real there isn't much of a real like it's not like from the Birds of Prey movie where everybody is just going after some high valued object or some magical staff from some other film or some kind of bizarrish item that people don't understand what the value is. It's just a girl with green eyes, and that's all that needs to be said. That's all that needs to be like fought over, and that's what I enjoy the most about this movie. It's not some medallion. It's not some staff. It's not some weird bizarrish book. It's just a girl with green eyes. Simple but effective. Um, I think this movie overall is would could quite possibly be said to be simple, random, but effective. Simple and random, but effective is how I could really condense exactly what is going on with this film. Some people might say that this movie might be too random, um, or might also not have a good payout at the end, because some of these some of these movies need to have like a happy ending or needs to have a justifiable thing to go into a sequel or something along those lines. But no, it just kind of like the it's just kind of like a very old like western in a lot of ways, and I think that's why they perfectly do this like east meets west kind of thing. Because looking at this movie, it's a western, but then also it's a foreign film. It's both like smashed into one another, and then there's just kind of all kind of random esh like creatures and stuff like that, kind of really showcasing that yeah, this is a foreign film with all kinds of interesting and random things that people are just like going, "What the f is that?" Because it quickly went off screen, and then people just like, I don't know, it's just a part of the film. That seems to be what kind of really does go on within this film. is just a lot of stuff appears on screen and you're not really understanding why it appears on screen, but it's just there. It looks interesting, but then it just quickly goes away. Um, yeah. So, I think it's about that time to talk about this movie in very much spoiler terms because I'm very interested in the actual spoiler points of this movie. Um, when looking at it, this Pork Chop Express is looking to definitely go into spoiler territory. Cause man, is there so many like goofy things going on within this film that it's just like, oh well, I guess like looking at it, I guess there is some bizarrish reason just because of how like I think everything that was presented within this movie was done to be different. There is nothing wrong with a different movie. There is nothing wrong with a movie that doesn't make sense. There's nothing wrong with a movie that you're looking at it and you're like, what is going on? There's nothing wrong with that. And, but also, there's sometimes when you're like, what is going on in this movie? And it ends up being bad. But in this case, the what is going on is just like, okay, whatever that was, I'm still enjoying this wonderful ride that is presented here. And like, yeah, sure. Like, if anything, there's so much about this that like, why did they need to do the effects that they did? Why did they need to do like there's so much times where they had to like do these like kind of like very much like disgusting s like rummaging through these sewer s like things and kind of crawling through these like tiny crevice like places, going into these places which only seem like sewers, and I was like why? It's like, god, this looks so dirty and this and that. um like ultimately to just kind of, I don't know, to look different. I think that's the only complaint that I have is like, why have so much time where somebody's like rolling around through garbage or like stuff like that, like underground dark s like sewer tunnels or something like that. It didn't, like, for me that was the kind of real disconnect, was just like shouldn't we have like really like fine-eyed looking things for these people to walk through and this and that instead of this grungy dirty area? Like, shouldn't there be all like nice and shiny locations for like people to go ooh and ah about instead of like ah like ah? But anyways, that's the only complaint that I really have. So I think it's about that time to get into spoiler territory. At the end of the day, I just want to say I liked this movie, and ultimately, not everybody will, but at the end of the day, I would definitely recommend people watching it. I know some people might think that this movie is a movie that, I don't know, just it doesn't quite work. It doesn't quite work. It's too rant. There's too much going. What is even the story at points? The story just kind of like you don't really quite understand exactly everything. But again, you're just like, meh, whatever. You're just like, meh, whatever. So I think it's about that time to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's that time again to spoil this movie. Realize I would otherwise not say ruin this movie because ultimately, I'm sure so many people have so many different opinions upon this film. I believe even watching, I think I saw at some point, Cinematographic or the Angry Video Game Nerd had reviewed this movie, I think, at some point with Macaulay Culkin. That was my real reason for going into this. Like, I think I've kind of been wanting to watch this for a very long time, and finally being able to get to it. This movie was actually number one on one of my subscription videos. I made a top 10 list of movies that I absolutely want to see, and this was number one on that list. And surefire enough, it's probably not the best movie on that list, but I enjoyed this movie just as well as some other things that I recently saw, like Ready Player One, which was on that list, the Meg, which was on that list, Jigsaw. I didn't enjoy that as probably as much as this, but nonetheless, I saw that as well. So we have Jack Burton that's in a semi truck, and ultimately he is talking that he's the Pork Chop Express, and he's kind of giving people like the lay of the land, and ultimately just kind of going on this speaker and consistently just muttering all kinds of stuff with probably people that don't even speak his language. He's just continuously on this radio just going, well, yeah, like the life of Jack Burton is a pretty interesting endeavor. You know, Jack Burton would always say that the day isn't done until I'm done, or something like that, or whatever that he would randomly have to say in most of this movie. So reasonably, you would have this bizarrish thing where Jack is teamed up with this guy that is otherwise just bizarrely like they're driving through this street, and ultimately knowing full well how small some foreign streets are, where you can't even get like the smallest car through most of their streets. It's kind of impossible, and I'm like, oh my god, we have a semi going through the streets of a city that, yeah, usually tends to have very small streets where you can even probably even get barely like a Mini Cooper or a very small like even maybe motorcycles might even have trouble getting through some kind of streets and this and that. But again, I haven't lived in foreign areas, so I've just seen a lot of stuff through foreign film movie, and this and that. So we have Jack Burton, who ultimately is going through this one street, and this one street has this big old fight breaking out, and Jack Burton and this assistant of his doesn't know what's going on. They're like, or Jack doesn't know what's going on, but it's like his partner, his protege, is like, yeah, we like there's this like Chinese showdown or whatever, Chinese fight out or whatever, and it ends up breaking down into like all these people just all fighting, and I'm just like, wow, this is really interesting way to open a film. And then ultimately we just have these three guys that all look like Raiden from Mortal Kombat, and I think everybody kind of says that. We have these three guys that otherwise look like Raiden from Mortal Kombat, and like bizarrely they have these interesting like little talent-esh like things to them that they have to showcase, and then eventually just Jack Burton just starts driving through the street just kind of like, F it, like, you know what, like I gotta get through here. And like it seems like the more and more like crazy stuff is going on within this street, like the more I gotta get out of here. And he's not gonna get out of there with just running out. No, he's gonna take his truck with him, because his truck is very valuable to him, of course. um there seems to be always conflicting things where it's like, well, hey, yeah, I can just pay this off of my insurance and this and that. And like it was kind of funny when he was talking to his insurance people on the phone later on, and he's like, I don't want to hear any act of God or anything, but like, and he starts going off to this person on the phone, but then like he ends up having to talk to somebody, and then he's like, wait a minute, could you repeat that on the phone, as if he's actually talking to somebody on the phone, which was great, to have that in the actual phone. Um, but yeah, so God, there's so many memorable lines that is just throughout this movie. Like the one time where the kind of the guy with the robes, he looks like the Mandalorian, from Iron Man 3 or whatever. The guy that is like the main villain of this thing that ends up getting freaking like ran over in the beginning of this movie by Jack. Um there's this one line that he delivers where he's just like, "Yes, you've come here with your green eyes." And I was like, like, of course, like, you would have to mention that this person would come here with their green eyes. I'm like, of course you would. That is just so funny. Um, because any normal person wouldn't bring that up, but in this movie, like, they have to bring up like the person comes there with their green eyes. It's like, okay, all right. That's kind of like, to me, when in the movie like Split, where Hedwig, in that movie, when the guy's going through all the personalities and he's like, "Yeah, I like blue socks. I also like red ones." And then, like, that's kind of like the same kind of like thing where it's like stuff like that, where it's like, "You come here with your green eyes." It's like, it's like, what was she gonna come up with any other eyes? Man, you know what would have been great if at the very end of this movie she would have had contacts on the entire time, and it would have actually, the girl would have actually been a person without green eyes at the end of this film. Hence why the movie ends the way it does, and that would have made a lot more sense. But I guess maybe during that time they didn't have things like contact lenses and stuff like that. Even though I'm assuming no, like, the actor, I think, doesn't naturally have green eyes, so I think she probably was wearing contact lenses through most of the movie. But like, looking at it, I guess they weren't gonna like have that kind of ending. Mood point. So ultimately, we have it to where at first it just becomes like Jack is the wrong place, wrong time, and he effed with the wrong guy. So this guy is going to come after him and chase after him, but then eventually, while Jack and his trusty sidekick are going through this place, he's ultimately they're ultimately bumping into these women with green eyes. And so Jack, his quest is to eventually hook up with a girl with green eyes. And it seems like everybody else has that same kind of quest, bizarrely, and I don't understand why. Because it doesn't seem like anybody who hooks up with a girl with green eyes gets something at the end of this film, which, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you would think that bizarrely, like, if Jack hooked up with a girl with green eyes, that he would get some kind of like superpower, or like temporary superpower, or get some kind of bizarrish ability or something like that. To where, like, if they did a sequel, then they could have a sequel with Jack having this like bizarrish like ability or something like that. Um, like, I don't quite get what the task is of getting this girl with green eyes, because ultimately it doesn't really quite, like, where does it exactly go? Um, but we have it to where at first it seems like they're after Jack, but then they're in fact, once the villains get these girls and they find out they have green eyes, they steal them and kidnap them, and well, Jack and his trusty sidekick have to eventually go and rescue these girls, because everybody in this world likes girls with green eyes, I guess. And so they're utterly just like, I have to go after this women, these women. Um, and very much the girl that Kurt Russell falls for is very much like an April O'Neil, very much like reporter and stuff along those lines. And speaking of lines, a lot of the stuff that she ends up delivering, I kind of chuckle and find funny as well. Um, because it like everything has to be delivered in some kind of like formality. Um, like everything has to interestingly be delivered. Um, like especially with like how like the reporter is the love interest of Kurt Russell in this movie. The way she delivers like stuff is just kind of like that very much old like reporter s like talk. Like, yeah, see, we got a up and comer right here. Yeah, she's got a lot of moxie and like she's coming up in the world. She's like that's how like kind of the reporter kind of like to like with me kind of like delivers a lot of her lines and I just thought that that was kind of fun. It kind of felt like a very old news reporter delivering the lines and stuff like that. Um Looking at this though, eventually we get down to Jack's journey through this bizarrish or going into this bizarrish like palace or whatever you want to call it. The funny thing is like how they just mentioned that their phone repairman is just having a phone and they both are wearing two matching jean jackets. It's like what? Like just to have a phone and say, "Yeah, I'm a phone repairman." Why? Why? But justifiably, it's just like I guess just take the person for what. And then, like, funny enough, it's hilarious how they conveniently just think that they're just going through all this and just easily like slipping away and like. And when they see the camera, they have to talk more like phone garbage that doesn't make any sense just to like, oh yeah, we really dodged a bullet there and this and that. Anyways, we get to the aspect of this bizarrish elevator that leads them down this like underwater place with all these skeletons of previously dead people, and then eventually that gets them to be tied up into a like this bizarre wheelchair, and then eventually they get to see the I guess let's just call him like the emperor, the kind of the villain of this whole thing. Like we'll just call him like an emperor or something like that. Like this guy is like extremely old. It's like, yeah, shouldn't he be like 1,000 years? And of course this guy is like a wizard or like a witch or something like that, where aging um aging like this person ages very slowly, but realistically when you actually do see this person like as younger, it's just because like, well, that's the illusion. um but anyways, you have it to where this old man, when he eventually gets to talk to the like reporter girl, like it is really kind of funny how he's just kind of like repeating back to her what she says, and then he's ultimately like Gucci Gucci goo and like this like goofy thing, I think, to like break the actor or something like that. uh I don't know what that goal was. Like it was either to either be funny or like I think at some times there was some stuff delivered to maybe like see if they could like I'm wondering if maybe some of the actors were trying as much as possible to break some of the actors while they were delivering some of their lines, just to see if they could break them. Um, Maybe that was a goal throughout this movie. Maybe some lines were delivered differently and stuff like that, just to see if like people could break people. I don't know. It would be interesting to see if this movie does have like a gag reel or like deleted scenes or something like that. Just to realistically see if like people were just trying to break people. to ultimately make them laugh while they're saying their lines, because you have a person off camera that like doesn't have anything to say, or like just wants to see if this and that, or maybe it was just to do stuff just to be funny. Anyways, so we have it within this film that this emperor guy is very old, ultimately leading to where Kurt Russell and his eventually gang of crew, where it seems like eventually he uh, comes back with a force to be reckoned with, and they have this big fight out moment um, within the villains and stuff like that. But it is kind of funny when looking at it, like how like Jack, when there's this like fighting of multiple people at one point in the scene, like he accidentally throws his knife off to the side, and when he goes to retrieve said knife and come back, all the guys are down, and like because his sidekick is just kicking everybody up and beating the crap out of him, while Jack is just like, aha, and then it's like, aha. It's like, but then you have the person that is bizarrely offering like Jack like this fish, and he's like, later. It's like what? What? All right, just all right. Um, you have it with yeah. It's this movie is so bizarre, and you have this bizarre looking like Henry the Henderson looking creature, very much like Chewbacca s looking like creature that randomly appears, and you don't understand why. But then you also have this like eye creature that has to be like the eyes of this entire place, and like again like the creature s like effects that are going on with this movie. It's fun, but then you just question why that they absolutely had to have these things. But I just go with just enjoy the ride. You also have them kind of going through this sewer trying to get through this palace, and there's some creature that grabs one of the good guy minions and consumes them, and then they have to throw a fireball in there so the creature won't come back out. And Jack's like, "What is this?" It's something along those lines. Excuse me. And it's like, well, whatever it is, it won't come back. I'm like, okay, whatever. And they just keep on rolling. And you have it to where ultimately we have to have Jack Burton confront eventually all the bad guys, and they have to all fight this out. While Jack Burton, like I was just clearly thinking, I'm like, I don't think that Jack is gonna take anybody out. I don't think that Jack is really gonna fight anybody. I really wish that they could have honestly gone even further with this, to where it just seems like Jack just ultimately like always just seems to do like absolutely nothing. Like it was kind of funny when like the first hurrah like moment of like, yeah, we're gonna fight it out, and then he shoots a gun in the air and plant the ceiling falls on him and he knocks himself out so he can be awoken seconds later, and then just like, oh okay, whatever. And then just he goes, and the first person that he takes out ultimately falls on top of him, and the guy is too heavy to where Jack can't easily move this character. So while everybody is taking everybody out, Jack is struggling with just getting this guy off of him. And I was ultimately thinking, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if also while you pull like a Peter Griffin, where like after Jack gets this guy off of him, then all of a sudden he like quickly gets back up, and then he goes, oh, I cramp, and then he falls back over, and then he can't fight anybody else because he has a cramp in his leg. Like, wouldn't it be always funny if like there was always some like excuse for Jack to not be able to fight people, and like there would always be some justifiable excuse that like, and then people would want to really try to pull him back into the fight, but he's like, oh no, 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 just give me a minute, just like give me a second. like, like I just like if they're gonna go full throttle with Kurt Russell not being able to do much, then they should really go all the way with it. Really, really pull out a lot of the jokes, knowing full well that Kurt isn't gonna like fight much of anybody, or like the only thing that he will do is like shoot people from time to time. But eventually, once he does like start to shoot people and kill people, like they ultimately have to like look at him and say, "Is this the first time ever plugging somebody?" And Kurt's like, "No, I've killed." And, like just walk off like a badass. Like God, all right. Um, like they ultimately have to like. I wish that they would have made much more of a pause for like him first killing and shooting somebody. Like if they would have really milked this out of him really killing somebody, of how he really felt about it, and just like, and this and that would have been funny as well. But no, they just kind of like quickly kind of brush it off of like the first time ever plugging somebody. It's like, okay, sure. Um, but anyways, eventually we have Jack eventually going and rescuing the damsels, and ultimately the kiss kind of cementing that, okay, at first like these people like might have been playing around with one another. It's kind of like a Han Solo Lois, or Han Solo Princess Leia kind of thing going on with the people that are supposed to have a love interest with one another. But eventually, once they actually do cement this whole thing, because I think Jack Burton is kind of very much like a Han Solo s like character, where his reporter love interest is kind of like the Princess Leia of this whole thing. Um, Once they have the kiss, of course, Jack has to fight his main villain with lipstick on his face the entire time. I was like, well, yeah, of course you would do something like this in this movie, of course, because it's perfect. um you have to where like it's bizarrely, it's not some like, it's like it's not, it was great to not have it be some kind of bizarrish like magic versus like Jack having a gun, or it wasn't something like they were gonna have some, again, some kind of hand v hand combat, because again, Kurt Russell hasn't done this through this entire movie realistically. So like looking at it, that's not the way he would go and kill this character. But it ends up being something as simple as who is more accurate than who. It ends up becoming this like knife throwing contest, and bizarrely, like Kurt, or Jack's character, catches a knife, throws it back at him, and ultimately kills the guy because the knife goes right through his head. I'm like, well, yeah, of course you have this kind of fight out, because Jack hasn't fought a single person in this entire movie, and you need to keep it that way. Um, like again, he only kills people with guns, and that's the only way that he should kill people, is via guns. Like I think he might have maybe punched one person or something along those lines, but it should always be him shooting people and then him winning by some bizarrish way that doesn't quite make sense. To where, so this guy had magic on him, but like evidently that magic had nothing to do with throwing knives, and this guy gets keeled over, and then it gets to the point of just having to defeat these Raiden looking motherfuckers that ultimately throughout this movie eventually start to change their outfits and stuff like that. To have one of the Raiden Esh looking characters just kind of like all of a sudden just going to this big huge like blowing Ash up of himself was kind of very much hilarious. And then they had to kind of consistently figure out how to take all the other kind of uh, other electrical whatever guys, the guys that had the kind of a Raiden Esh like power or whatever, to take all those guys out. Like, God, it's like, they and to also have the one kind of guy that could throw magic at people and help them out at certain kind of points, because this gets to an ensemble piece towards the end. Getting through all those people and then eventually just being like, hurrah, huzzah, we all won. And so they ultimately just kind of like go to a bar and just kind of celebrate and this and that, or go to a restaurant or whatever. Ultimately, or the housing place that they were out earlier where Jack was making the phone call and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyways, so we have it to where Jack ultimately like does like kiss the girl at the end of this movie, but he they ultimately don't cement the relationship. It's just kind of like, well, hey, maybe I'll see you, like maybe I'll see you around, kind of thing. Like, and ultimately he does kind of like the walking into the sunset kind of thing, like normal cowboys do, to where they're like, well, I guess we should have some kind of relationship in this thing, but we also want to make it like the guy like walks in the sunset at the very end of this, like a normal western. So he's kind of very passive about a lot of things, and then eventually kind of like walks away and just kind of like, and ultimately he has to like shake the hands and stuff like that and kiss babies of all of his ensemble cast, and kind of mention how good of a time that he had it, and they got to do like the symbol and the karate symbol and like stuff like that. Because I don't get why they were doing like these symbols to everybody the whole entire time. Like, it was just like everybody was doing this, and I was like, what? I was like, why are they doing that so frequently to everybody? Just like, yeah, ooh, yeah. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I guess that's just like good luck or like good times or whatever whatever that meant. Like, to have it have done so frequently, especially when they had that opening fight scene where everybody was just looking at one another and just like, yeah, 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 yeah. I think that it would have been hilarious if they would really extended that thing to made it so like people kept doing that like over and over and over, and they could have really milked this out. And and then like it would have been like 10 minutes of people just doing this, and then like ultimately it would have went right back into the fighting, because it would have made no sense, but it would have been hilarious. It would have been just like God, in the Family Guy animated Star Wars movie, they had it to where everybody like in one scene consistently like nods at somebody, and like this thing goes on for I think like 5 to 10 minutes of people just nodding at one another, and then like they go to the next person, and the next person just goes and just nods, and it's this over and over and over for a long-winded amount of time, just people just going and looking and just going hmm. And like it's just nodding. So I thought that that would have been funny if they would have like put that in there and just had people just consistently just going like this just a lot, and like just to like eat more seconds of time in the movie, just like yeah, 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 yeah. Because I honestly think that they should have went full force with the comedy instead of the action portion of it. Like, I really think this could have been a really amazing comedy that really could have broke a lot of like broke into doing a lot of things that no one else would was ever going to do, or probably might have done, because of like, why did they do this for so long? Like, maybe it would have really stuck out as people as like, why did they do so many things? But then when looking at it, it's like, oh my god, this is comedy gold. And and they were kind of ahead of the curve, and this and that. So dare in fact, that's how I feel about Big Trouble in Little China, but I'm going to get out of here to avoid having this review be too long. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.